Hi friends, it's Alex and Macky. We're back with another video. Today is...
What we recommend day. That's not even how it's supposed to be called. No, it's Macky and Alexa Recommends, and it is part 3 of our anime recommendation series because we have been complete anime trash in the last several months of 2018, moving into 2019, and probably the rest of our lives. And the interesting thing is that Alexa and I have a very large overlap of what sort of matters to us, unlike books where there's like a small overlap, but it's like a deep overlap. Here it's a huge overlap, and we basically get murdered in our tracks for whatever it is that we both love, and then everything else sort of on the fringes just sort of stays on the fringes. Like I wouldn't watch what she would watch on her outliers and vice versa. Today is the sci-fi and shonen anime sort of recommendations because we love us some.
Apparently, I like shonen.
If it's the following shonen anime, so we'll start off with the sci-fi ones and then sort of move on to the shonen ones. But before all of that, I just kind of wanted to give a shout out to a couple of series that I haven't had the chance to make Alexa suffer through until the good parts yet. First shout out would have to be Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is coming to Netflix. Yes,
Netflix,
yes,
right?
It's totally coming to Netflix. Eva came out at a time when those people who are my age were sort of kind of discovering anime, sort of, and so we were just like, we'll take anything, even giant robots and existential crises. Yes, at the same time, this falls under the shonen sci-fi trope because it's not so heavily just robots. There's kind of like a slice of life, growing up, coming of age piece to it that doesn't involve war and the ethical dilemmas of giant robots. So that was Neon Genesis Evangelion, so totally recommend that. Another shout out to Flame of Recca. The anime didn't finish what the manga actually did, which I thought was really, really great. It's again smack dab in the shonen anime trope where you've got your young teenage boy coming into like a lot of power and then facing off against crazy odds, which also is Yu Yu Hakusho.
We watched a good amount of that.
We watched a goodish amount of it, but we're trying to get
early days though.
Very early days, meaning not the dark tournament days where we get to figure out what the backstories of Hiei and Kurama are. So again, another one of those really cool kind of battle animes, and there's always a trope in shonen where there's always a tournament, and there's several tournaments as these things go, and I would like to say it's predilected on, and I'm not giving the shout out because I was sort of done with it really quick in my childhood, nor would I recommend it to anyone who that I know, not because it's bad, but because it's just not something that I kind of have leaned towards. But it's Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z started the whole tournament like thing where there's always people pitted against each other in power, and so that's sort of where you want to trace it, and those are our shout outs. So
does Pokemon actually count?
Actually, yes, Pokemon does have... I was about to ask
you, does it count as I mean, technically it counts as sci-fi, but it also sort of is formulated like a shonen?
You know what?
It's always tournaments.
You know what? In the essence of all of the hours that we've played Pokemon, Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, we have to give a shout out to Pokemon.
We have to.
And it sort of deserves to be on the shout outs list because we don't really go through every single episode of Pokemon pretty much ever, even if we're technically...
played a lot of games, though.
Exactly, even if we're technically video game trash for Pokemon. Yes, definitely shonen.
Okay,
Young boy coming into his own with a power this kind of the power is in the Pokemon, and there's always a tournament, and there's always that thing about shonen that you don't always see in shoujo, where there's this almost nigh infinite kind of different versions of the power or thing that you see, and how that interacts with our main character. So that said, we'd like to venture now into our sci-fi picks over the past few years. We're going to start with this beautiful collector's edition of Sword Art Online's Ordinal Scale.
But really, we recommend pretty much the whole series.
Yeah, we recommend pretty much the whole series. A lot of folks, and we...
Mostly the 8 parts of both seasons, but
Yeah, I mean, we love Sword Art Online so much, and we understand why people don't really sort of connect to it as much. But for those of us who loved Warcross immensely...
Oh my gosh, you would love...
Sword Art is, kind of in the same kind of genre of lighter fare in terms of not very heavily into the sci-fi, but it's got that kind of slice of growing up as well, and that whimsy.
Yeah.
And by the way, Sword Art Online is basically a bunch of kids and adults.
They end up trapped in a VVMRO game.
The people who rejoin get stuck, like their consciousness is locked in
neurologically. They're locked into the game. And the only way to get out of it is if someone beats all the levels of the game, which is like 100 levels.
Exactly.
And if you die in the game, you die in real life. So.
And you would think, what the heck is going on? Right?
It's very twisted.
And it's so cool because it gets to play with your brain, because you see a medieval setting, but then people are like loading like menu screens.
It's so cool.
And you realize it's a freaking video game, and it's kind of awesome.
And it's fun because the main character Kirito is more like a lone wolf type character. He's like, I'm just mind my own business, do my own thing, and he's extremely good at games. Like, that is his thing. And eventually, during the course of this entire game, like, you watch as he develops relationships with other players. He realizes that maybe he doesn't have to do all of this on his own, and it's like so.
Which is the foil that Asuna's character plays.
Yes.
In that she's a joiner, and she was like a high-ranking sort of person in one of the guilds.
Also, just collects a lot of. He collects like a group of people around him because he's just that type of personality.
Apparently, like as surly and as sort of like almost sullen that he is, he's actually not mean. He's not gruff.
No, not at all.
He's just kind of a loner, and he's just quiet. But if push comes to shove, he's got a great heart. The way Ordinal Scale, which is the last movie that came out, ties in both seasons 1, 2, and
into 3.
Oh boy, it's really beautiful. I love that the world is growing. We had no idea that there was going to be a new Sword Art Online
which we have to catch up on, but so far what we've seen of it was pretty interesting.
Right, and so that's pretty much that. So highly recommend for you sci-fi fans. The next we want to recommend would have to be a couple of Studio Ghibli movies. Very heavy on the sci-fi, specifically Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind. Sorry, I'm confusing Nausicaa. The first Nausicaa that I ever watched that was like translated into English, like dubbed in English in the 1970s, where it was called Warriors of the Wind, and they didn't call her Nausicaa; they called her Princess Sandra. Post-apocalyptic Earth, where the world is covered in toxic like jungles, and a young girl from the Valley of the Wind, a princess, just happens to be the key to changing everything.
As it made me cry,
it's just so great.
Nausicaa
super epic.
Such a great character to follow.
Warning to people who don't like bugs, so maybe don't watch it because there are giant bugs in the toxic jungle. But it is one of the best crafted, like the OG Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki at his finest, cutting his teeth. I hear the story was they actually had to create the movie so that they could sell the manga, even if he started with the manga or something to that effect. Of somebody just Googled that.
So beautiful though. And it's such a moving story in its simplicity. And I think like there's a message there that I didn't expect when I went into it, because I watched it way later than Macky did, because I had to watch it because he told me it was his favorite. And yeah, it's really good, and I love Nausicaa a lot as a character, and I definitely think you guys should check it out. Yeah,
and for the 70s to have a female lead that everyone listened to, like nobody was like, gee, she's a girl. Everyone's like, listen to the princess. It's amazing to watch that. Speaking of princesses and others, this is Laputa, Castle in the Sky. Laputa was actually also a Studio Ghibli movie. It's centered around an otherworldly kind of place where there were kingdoms, I guess, sort of in the sky. They were looking for Laputa, the floating castle, because it had like advanced tech that people were always looking for, and people always got lost. They built airships, nobody could ever find it, until this one girl actually falls from the heavens out of nowhere, who has a necklace that must be tied to Laputa, and she meets a young boy, and the Shipper Trash Nation attacked. But everything changed until the Shipper Trash in me arose, and so that was great. We loved this. Fun. It's a great romp, not necessarily as grand in scale as Nausicaa, but definitely as grand in depth, I would like to say, because it's also a good story. It's also a good story.
Very thematic. Very well done. The characters are great. The character relationships are great. It's overall just another one of those movies where you're like, I didn't expect much going into it, but I came out of it and I was like, I'm so glad I finally watched this.
You can never go wrong, really. I'm gonna go with Anonatsu. Anonatsu is a story about an alien. It's an alien who crashes onto Earth and sort of gets in touch with like a local boy.
Yeah.
And spends the most magical summer together, where he tries to conceal her identity from his other friends that she's actually an alien, but that comes to a head towards the end, and shenanigans ensue.
It's like a weird combination of like science fiction, because there's like a big science fiction.
Yeah, there's a huge chunk that's science fiction.
But it's also like, it's one summer, we're gonna make a movie!
And we're gonna be the best friends ever.
It's so adorable.
If there's one thing that sort of ties Alexa and my sort of Venn diagram of things that we kind of, it's that whole coming of age, growing up kind of.
That's our favorite thing.
Young people finding their own in the world and finding it together.
And it's just so much fun. I'm still kind of mad at how it ends.
The ending is a little kind of
like, it makes you so
like, it was so on the nose, and then it decided to be subtle in the end. It was like, come on, man, I was
like, can you not?
You were telling the story, you were driving the plot points home like whack-a-mole, okay?
Yeah.
Like, and then suddenly at the end you're gonna be like, ooh, something artistic.
What? Like, no.
No, just give us the
But it is worth watching all of those episodes. It's very fun. The next thing that we are going to mention is actually something we started watching because of my friend Lauren at Fiction Tea on Instagram.
And then, to me, Gina Shino, I don't know your full name, but you are totally, like, always commenting on the channel, recommended Made in Abyss, and it's like, sure, I'll check it out, and that's fine. And then we both decided to try it out on Amazon.
It's a really good show. Like I was promised, it has very beautiful animation, and you really come to care for these characters while you're watching their story unfold. It's essentially set in this town that's on the edge of an abyss, and the main characters are all from the orphanage in that town, and they're all studying to become future explorers that go down different levels in the abyss. The main character is determined to go all the way down because she thinks she's gonna find her mom.
Yeah.
And everything comes to a head for her, especially when this boy shows up out of nowhere from the abyss, and they're also trying to figure out like
what he is,
where he came from. So the story starts out pretty typical.
Right.
Like it's nice, and you get to see them like go down into the abyss and like fight off whatever they have to, or learn things, and interact with each other.
And as you finish season 1, and it's cute how every end of the episode they almost chart how low they've gone on the map. And after you finish season 1, it's still pretty much overall thematically sort of a semi-light-ish fantasy sci-fi take, except for the one part. So halfway through the series, you're gonna find out that it gets really, really dark in and around the characters. Like their through lines are pretty fair, but when they sort of intersect with like the darker elements of this thing, we're talking Full Metal Alchemist levels dark.
You're just like
that kind of thing where you're like, we did not sign up for this. It's just crazy.
And yet you can't stop watching.
And you can't stop it because they're so cute and you're invested. So kind of like a Venus flytrap where you're like,
already there, too late.
Might as well, and then you end up loving these guys, and to me and Alexa, I think it's something that we share in common is like we almost owe it to the characters to finish their story. So
if I can't get behind a character, I am not going to keep watching an anime.
And for some reason, we can get behind these two. Alrighty, so that wraps up the sci-fi angle to things. Now we move on to the full-on shonen side of things. Let's start with everything that I made Alexa watch. So
you made me watch every single one of these. I don't know what you're talking about. Like every single one of the 4 shonen that are going to be mentioned in this video is because Macky. Rurouni Kenshin, or Samurai X as it's known in the Philippines, I think, and maybe in a couple of other countries. Macky made me watch this show, and at first I was like, okay, I'm interested. And then like I think it was like
it's a ginger swordsman. How often does that happen?
Yeah, it's weird because like it's a shonen that's set in a historical, like a past historical period.
Yeah, actual,
and it
parallel history.
It follows Kenshin, who is a, what do you call it? Swordsman?
He's a Ronin, basically. Yeah. Those are
wandering samurai. Is that what it is?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, that they're kind of uncoupled from any kind of loyalty. They just are fend for themselves.
But there's a whole history behind how Kenshin got to this point where he is a wandering samurai, and the story actually starts when he ends up in a town and he ends up getting involved with a girl who runs a dojo. Yeah. So she practices a certain style of swordsmanship.
Kamiya Kashinryu. So Kaoru basically runs a dojo in place of her father, gets kind of tangled up in a bunch of sort of
they both get tangled
in some crazy stuff.
And of course more people show up and join the fun because that's how that works.
And shonen is always around the one guy doing the thing with all of the power, or at least trying to find the power, and then he gets roped into a situation where he's got to help, and a bunch of people get to help along with him.
And then because they're so touched by his help, they end up being like,
just like, I mean, I like to watch all of this stuff, the entire series, the OAV, which is the prequel, just so that we could not be spoiled by the live action movies, which ironically, we've watched everything except the live action movies, which I bought first, and I'm just like, well, let's watch the series first before the live action.
And the series is so good, like, it's so fun. It's fairly typical shonen, as Macky has described it already, where there's a lot of like fighting and tournament type things, and there's always 2 people fighting against each other. There's always one-on-one battles. There are a few melee battles where there's like 3-on-3, 4-on-4. Oh, I love those.
But but central to this story and their growth is the one-on-one battles that always happen, and the quest for finding some kind of power. Now in Kenshin's way, he's already sort of top tier with all of his secret
abilities.
Hitten Mitsurugi Ryu is Kenshin's like sword style, if Kaoru's is Kamiya Kashinryu. And towards the end, in middle and moving forward, it's all about Kenshin discovering, apparently find out he's, spoilers. Point is, it follows the trope of, there's more power that you thought you didn't need, but now apparently do, and now you're going to have to train to get better. There's
also like an underlying political through line in this, because it's a very turbulent time in this particular historical, like there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of different factions fighting for power, and Kenshin is obviously, even though he has divorced himself from all of this, like he doesn't want to be a part of it, he still gets roped into it.
Mostly because the rival factions that are trying to shake things up in Japan at the time are basically placing the people he loves, now cares for, in harm's way, bringing him out
And
of
that
retirement.
does not sit well with him.
Exactly. So more for the people that matter rather than just for him.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So that's
one.
That's Kenshin.
Number 2 is going to be a show that we don't own anything for yet.
Not just yet. Although we did pre-order the movie that's coming out in March because we absolutely need that. Like now.
The show in question is My Hero Academia. We actually started that one before, and I think I got 2 episodes in, and I was like, meh.
So we're so hopped up on the last 2 anime that we're going to talk about for this shonen piece, and we thought, all right, it doesn't resonate in that way because it's a completely different story.
And I'm also just not big on superheroes. Like that's not a thing that I am normally into. Macky is.
I am, and this is such a it looks like your vanilla type. This is a world with superheroes kind of deal.
But
if you give it 3 or 4
I think you have to get it into like 4
episodes actually, and that's exactly how my brother recommended it, as all of our friends. If you get past episode 4, if you're not hooked by then, you're fine to put it down. Like no love lost there. But unfortunately, Alexa and I got sucked into a deep dark hole.
We spent an entire like 2 days finishing whatever. Yeah, 3 maybe.
We needed it. It's just
so good,
and it doesn't give us the feels that our top tier anime, kind of shonen anime,
which we'll get to in a second,
but it evokes those kinds of feels. So My Hero Academia centers on a young boy named Midoriya, who has absolutely no powers in a society where about 90% of the people have some kind of quirk. That's what they call it, an ability.
But even though he's never had it, he's always wanted to be a hero.
He's a super huge hero geek nerd where he takes down like powers, weaknesses, very, very Batman.
And his favorite hero of all time is the number 1 superhero in the world.
He's basically Superman if you had, like Superman and Hulk put together, because he just gets stronger without turning ugly. When he gets on this person's radar and gets a chance to be a hero, shenanigans ensue.
And he goes off to hero school.
It's a totally different story. That's the thing. It takes a lot of familiar tropes, puts it in a blender, and gives you a completely different story that not a lot of people have seen.
I think what I like most about it is, unlike most of the other shonen that we watch, that we mentioned, like they don't really spend too much time drawing out certain parts.
Yes.
Like,
oh, that's so nice.
The fights are not they are necessary. They happen, and there's always a reason that they happen, but they never get drawn out into like 7 or 8 episode arcs where they're literally just spending 10 minutes in this fight
because of 19 like flashbacks.
Yeah, in this case,
hey, is time-honored tradition.
It's a nice refreshing change to have like a show where that's still there, like the traditional stuff or content is still there, but they have managed to like condense it down into something that's like a little bit faster, and you feel like you're not so much losing the pace as you are like keeping.
It's actually super well paced for me personally,
and they just build the characters so well. Every character that's important to the show gets their own moment.
It's a slow burn with these guys, and that's why we recommend it so much.
Like it's a fun gang too. Like there's so many characters and they're so much fun to watch. Like it's so good. So much happens in 3 seasons. Like
way too much. Like you think you'd think it was their first year at school too. So I'm so excited for where else this is gonna go.
Since this is in our top 3, I'm gonna just take a moment to tell you guys that in the show I have 2 favorite characters because why not? One of them gets a little more screen time, but the first one I'm gonna mention doesn't get that much screen time. He's actually their teacher.
Their teacher's name is
Aizawa,
and codename Eraserhead. Alexa,
I have a type, that's first of all, but also I just really think he's such an interesting character, and if they decided to explore more of his personality, I would not be angry about it.
E.g. if they published like light novels about it, Alexa would be all over that.
But my other favorite character is also my type, and his name is Shoto, and Shoto Todoroki. He has a quirk where half of his body produces ice and half of his body produces fire. He's just so great. He's just like, he's
so good looking.
He's like that aloof lone wolf prince character.
Like he's Prince Zuko with a modified set of issues.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, definitely check out My Hero Academia. If you get past the first 4 or 5 episodes and you are into the characters, into the story, then good job. If not, then the show might not be for you. But for us, it's definitely a new favorite, and we are very excited to see what comes next.
So, winding down to our top 2.
This is going to come as no surprise if you've been watching.
No surprise if you've been watching, channel. But Alexa's and my top 2 is actually
Bleach.
And the only reason why it's number 2 is because My Hero Academia hasn't finished yet. There's a huge chance that when My Hero finishes, it'll probably eclipse Bleach, only because the weakest point in Bleach would be its actual storytelling. Only reason it's up there is because the characters are great and the storytelling ruined a lot of that too. Spoilers, but it does not end great. And there are a lot of people that
rightfully so, expressed how upset they are about
It's much better than we ever will, so we're not going to harp on how crappily Bleach ended in the manga, although the anime doesn't really finish it.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about how we don't necessarily love how it ends either, or how it was done, especially because, for me, in particular, I haven't actually read all of the manga. I know how it ends, because I've read that much, but I've mostly just watched the anime, and the anime stops, like, what, halfway through?
Halfway through, which, like, actually, they stop after the arc that sucked everywhere at all on the manga and on the anime.
Side note, I know it sounds like we're complaining a lot, but it just really annoys me that they didn't actually animate the other arc, because that arc is so much more interesting.
If they just hung on for one more season, that was the one that would have like made everything awesome.
It's so epic, and like that's the most epic like arc. Instead, they decided to give us fillerific arc.
Alas, funding. So and
but I know, again, it sounds like we're complaining a lot about the show, but the truth is,
we want to get that out of the way.
Because we love the lore a lot, like the background lore
goodness.
And the characters.
For those of you who have not been following or have never heard of Bleach before, it centers in a world where...
There's another world.
World called Soul Society, populated by what, by people who sort of
Souls.
have, like, passed on from this life.
Yeah.
However, a significant chunk of them have the capacity to become soul reapers or shinigami. Basically, people who get sent back into our world, the world of the living, to sort of make sure that souls are guided towards the end.
Yeah.
And where there are malignant type beings that eat souls, because they themselves were souls that were corrupted, called hollows, they can fight those off with no problem. Now, shenanigans ensue when our guy, Ichigo Kurosaki, ends up encountering one of those, he sees ghosts. And he sees one of the kids, like the ghosts of one of the kids who got run over by a car, get pursued by a hollow, which is that giant monster-like thing that eats like human souls.
And
being Ichigo, he's
fix that.
This is the kind of guy who, for the sake of a little boy's ghost, will bully a bunch of bullies for knocking over like the little offering, like flowers and stuff like that for the little kid. So when he sees something actually attacking said boy, he's like, I'm up. Get in the way of that.
And then when that thing attacks his home and his sisters, it's going down.
It goes down. And enter our first Shinigami that we'll ever see. Shinigami are the Soul Reapers, in the form of Rukia Kuchiki of the Kuchiki clan. And this is where it all begins and ends.
She almost dies.
She almost dies, and she says, you know what? If you want to survive, here, take my power, use it. And he does. And he's pretty damn good Shinigami from there on.
And he becomes a substitute Shinigami because he's technically still alive, but he has Rukia's powers. And this leads on into an arc where Rukia is eventually found out, and
apparently what she did was illegal, and now
she's going to be punished and executed.
And we want to end it here, at least this segment here, in that we discover the larger world of the Shinigami, in which there are 13 squadrons of Shinigami.
And there's like a ton of rules and a ton of things that you have to do.
And each of the 13 squads have a captain and a vice captain.
First of all, let's talk about how interesting the construction of this world is. Because the whole idea of a parallel society where there are Shinigami that can actually protect humankind from, dangerous hollows or to help them pass on to the other side is very fascinating. And the fact that there's an actual structure to it, there's a power structure to it. Like there's governance. There's like a central government body. There's the 13 court guard squads. There's a lead. There's a captain commander. And then each of the squads is like also ranked by power. It's very interesting because you see like the power doesn't manifest the same way for everyone. Everyone has a different thing. Like it's never exactly the same.
So one of the court guard squads are more from a healing aspect. The other one are more for like a covert ops. The other one's a science department. Which...
Like it's a whole bunch of things, and like it's just fascinating to see how it all plays out. And like a lot of it gets revealed over the course of that. Like you don't see it all at once. Like it's just like you think something is the top thing, and then you realize nope, that was not it.
Right. And when you see the opposition, whoever they are for the season, right, fight off against our guys as we grow and get to know who they are. Again, shonen trope, our guys versus their guys. They train, they get powers. The powers are bigger. By the way, the powers here manifest in the form of swords.
It's so cool.
Every Shinigami has a sword. Each blade has two forms. The first form is what the sword actually is, so it could be a giant whip, or maybe scythes, or whatever it is, right? And only the captains...
Broadsword.
Yeah, and only the captains have that final form. And so to have that kind of, like, nummy goodness in terms of...
It's so interesting.
Power structure and just kind of coolness.
And I will say that even though we did complain about some of the other arcs, there are a couple where I think they're interesting things. Like there's one entire arc where they explore the idea of the sword, or the zanpakuto is what they call it. and you sort of see more about each.
Because they're kind of semi-sentient as well. Like they have their own kind of, there's like a spirit to them. They have names.
You can call them. You encounter them when you're in your inner world or your mind, basically.
Which is a huge shonen trope, by the way, encountering your power.
Yeah, actually, yes, that's true. Because that'll also
There's always an internal world where you encounter the source of your power.
But the reason why Macky so deliberately decided to lead into the whole, like, there are 13 court guard squads with a captain and a vice captain, is he forgot, before we started watching Bleach, that my favorite kind of character, or one of my favorite character tropes, is a captain.
I'm like, ooh, there's this one captain that's totally her type.
And he is. He truly is. Like, that wasn't even...
I underestimated that as long as they were a captain, counted. And so she actually ended up liking more of the captains than
I am very well versed, apparently, in the captains and vice captains.
So crappy as the story... 13. Exactly. Crappy as the story may have been towards the end, the journey getting there and the reveals about the characters and their dynamics and who they are and their powers.
I just love the characters so
much.
We're
basically trash for the Gote 13.
I mean...
So.
Oh, the other complaint I will mention about Bleach is something Macky alluded to earlier. He mentioned that the storytelling is not very well done. I have to tell you, remember when I was talking about like how fights and how they're condensed in My Hero Academia? It's the complete opposite in Bleach, where it's like, takes forever for them to finish a fight.
Like 6 episodes.
Anyway, quickly, I will tell you my favorite characters, because why not? We're here. My top 3 are Toshiro Hitsugaya, who is the captain of the 10th squad and has a Zanpakuto that gives him more like ice abilities. And then Renji Abarai, who is the lieutenant of the 6th squad.
That she knows which squad they're a lieutenant of.
He's a frickin' redheaded hothead, and I love him. And my third is kind of like a tie, because like I refuse to give up on either one of them. They're both older Shinigami, because the other 2 are like almost contemporaries. These 2 are like older. So it's Kirako Shunji, who is the captain of the 8th, and Urahara Kisuke, who is stationed in Karakura Town, which is Ichigo's town.
He's a very mysterious character because you have no idea who... you think he's just a mad scientist until it hits you.
He was my like last minute favorite addition.
Which is exactly why we love Bleach. Even if the storytelling is sort of plot-wise crap towards the end, the character development reveals.
Oh my gosh, they were so good. And that was such a great twist.
The twists in the story are just really cool. Some people might argue that the last arc had the weirdest twists ever, the ones that were never animated, but I'm like, you know what? We got this far.
Run with it.
The only thing we hated was what you did with like the one thing, which is if you like ships, don't watch Bleach. Unless your crack ship just happens to be the main ship, in which case... congrats. And the thing about shonen is they're not always great on the shipping. Which
is like, this is why I can forgive it, because I'm like, I'll just think of them as a ship in my head and it's all good. Speaking of like multiple characters, ships, and a show we really, really love and that we've probably talked about multiple times before.
It's really more, I guess, a franchise now than it is a show, because it started out with Naruto.
Yep.
And then it branched out to Naruto Shippuden. And then now it's Boruto.
And Naruto Next Generation.
Naruto Next Generation.
You guys, I just love that world so much. Like, I just...
And the thing is, a lot of people sort of are hating on the spin-off Boruto, which occurs about like 15 years after the events of the entire Naruto series. And I get it. It's not the same story. It's not the same things. And it's not supposed to be. And it's its own thing.
I actually think they do some things better.
Absolutely. But if you want to put it and hold, you know, like, does it hold a candle to the original? Well, you know what? It's a different story altogether. It's apples and oranges, really, at the end of this.
Anyway, you guys have heard us talk about Naruto before, but it's essentially set in a world where shinobi are a thing.
There are several big nations, right? And every nation's military strength is in the strength of their hidden village that supports them. So that's the village where the shinobi are. They're born, raised, trained to fight. And Naruto is set in a time where there was where none of the nations were at peace ever. It's always an uneasy peace, and everybody's always smarting from the last war where everybody killed everybody's family. And it's just really bad. It's a terrible, terrible place to live in, centering on a young boy who just wants to be the head of his hidden village, which is Konoha, and become the Kage, which is like the leader, traditional kind of president or lead of that village. He wants to be the Hokage.
It is a very long journey, admittedly. It takes a very long time to get there, because you start with him when he is like 13.
No, 12. 11, yeah, 11, 12.
11.
They're
like
about.
Very young. You start with him very young, and by the end of Naruto, he's not even that much older. He's like 13.
Shippuden begins...
Well, he's like 16.
When he's in about 15 or 16. There you go. So
it is a very long journey.
And the thing is,
very long journey.
It starts out again in a school.
Yes.
Where this kid who's just mouthing off saying, I'm going to be the next leader of this place, and he has no ability. He's a prankster. He's a loudmouth. He's an orphan, so he has no family to help or support him. He's the town troublemaker until he finally gets paired up with the class genius and the girl who has a crush on the class genius.
who he has a crush
who
on.
he kind of has a crush on as well. So it doesn't go into the big sweeping world war kind of deal yet, but it does start off in a school and this kid trying to find himself and where he fits into the society, and they get paired up with a teacher. And from there, if you're not sold after that arc where they're sort of tested by their new teacher to see if they're worthy to graduate or not into being a regular kind of functioning low-level
that can be assigned
rank-and-file shinobi, then Naruto's not for you. And here's the thing, if you can survive their test into their first mission, which when they go home is their exams, right? So for them to graduate to the next level, kind of like a black belt kind of level,
then to graduate into a actual mission.
Like a violent shift in tone happens during the exam period where you get your tropes. You got people pitted against each other, you've got training, you explore the larger world there. But when you survive that, I have never wanted to be more part of anything in my life.
It is like one of those things where the world and the lore became so alive and so rich that I was just like, I am half convinced it actually exists somewhere and I just need to go there and find it.
It's so visceral too, because I mean, it's almost like, you know, how people are sort of have this spark of positive nationalism where you want to be part of a larger group of people that have the same ideals, you know.
Another thing that I find interesting is very similar to what I find interesting about Bleach, where like all of these abilities, they stem from somewhere and they're usually elemental. And it's also interesting to see how all of those powers manifest in different people depending on how they were brought up, how they were trained, what capacity they have on the inside. They usually call it chakra. That's what fuels a lot of the things they do.
And so there's a lot of nerdy stuff in there that's accessible enough if you...
there's also a lot of politics, again, which is unsurprising considering you're working with 5 nations who don't necessarily like each other.
But it actually is more to the side, because basically they'll say the politics head on. It's like, this guy wants that, and therefore this is the impact to you. Go do this. And you jump straight to it. It's very, very easy. If you guys loved how J.K. Rowling just sprung the past out on you from a Harry Potter perspective, Naruto, I think, is the Japanese equivalent of that, where majority of where we are today is because of the actions of several people that happened literally 50 years ago. Moving forward, you've got that rich backstory that comes to the forefront and plays a huge part and ties everything out to the end with Naruto. So if you love that, watch it for that. So
they did a really good job with dropping the reveals in between the current present day things that are happening, especially in Shippuden. That's the one where like you find out so much about what's going on, why certain characters act certain ways, why like people have very odd relationships with each other. You'll find out a lot of stuff, and it's so well done. And
if you're anything like Alexa and myself, you're gonna love these characters. So anything at all that happens to them and their descendants will matter to you.
Oh yeah.
Because they matter to you. I mean, when people matter to you, their kids matter to you. And so that's why we thoroughly enjoy Boruto so much, because we get to take a peek at what happened to our friends from that other world and get to see what they were up to.
We're their contemporaries now, because we're technically like around the same age group as like
true.
the people that we were watching.
My goodness, we've grown up.
It's so great, and I love it so much. It is the kind of show where I think sometimes for the fillery parts, this pacing gets kind of weird.
In which case,
I made
Alexa skip all of the fillers from Naruto and Shippuden because I read the manga. So I'm just like, that's a filler, skip it. That's a filler, skip it. That's a filler, skip it.
But I've been going back and watching them, so.
And that's fine. It's just.
But when we originally watched it, we basically stuck to the main story arcs and occasionally went into a filler if I thought that I wanted to.
And otherwise, I would recommend watching it in the way that the manga is ordered.
It's fun though, watching all the fillers. Well, because you just get more time with them, and that's always a good thing.
And that's the only reason I think that it matters, is because you want more time with these guys. It's just it does blunt the momentum.
Yes, while you're watching it for the original storyline, it does slow you down when it comes to the main like heart of the story. It's actually definitely better storytelling than Bleach, for sure. And I
marginally satisfying ships, marginally.
Marginally. I could actually stay up hours watching Naruto. So like I did with the other two, I'm going to tell you who my favorite characters are. The first one is Shikamaru Nara. He is one of Naruto's contemporaries, and at the beginning, like, he is the most unassuming lazy ass dude you will ever meet. And then you watch him become this person that you now see at the end of Shippuden and in Boruto, and you're just like, you're amazing.
Immense character growth on that one. And I think one of the best written characters in a long time.
He's one of the best secondary. He's not even a main character.
Yeah, and it's a great trope too, because they mixed up the whole kind of genius versus lazy ass trope. They put those two together. Like, there's always the slacker and there's always the genius. They made them the same guy.
Person. The other character I love very, very much is also a lazy genius.
Well, more like laid back, just chill, kind of
always late.
Unimpressed.
Cool.
Too cool for everybody.
And that's Kakashi Hatake, who is the sensei that takes over Naruto's team.
Little group, yeah.
At the beginning, I was already immediately like,
Team
oh, I
7.
really love this character. But then you see more about him as this entire series.
In fact, he was so well
loved.
loved.
Just like,
he was so well loved that the first real backstory arc, I think, that they deviated from Naruto's main story was absolutely.
It's actually one of the fillers that I was like, we have to watch it because it's effing Kakashi.
It's actually, ironically, it's not a filler. It is actually part of the manga.
I love it so much.
And that's the reason why I was like, we're watching this thing, because that was absolutely part of the manga. Kakashi's backstory. Which
it was just so good.
Talks about his childhood, mirroring how he grew up as a young ninja, sort of coming.
And those are really only the two characters. I love a lot of characters, but those are the two where I'm like always talking about them. So
this is actually making me want to watch that again.
I know. Right?
We're probably gonna do that right after this. So that's pretty much that. We could literally go on for another hour.
I was telling Macky, like, I warned him, like, I could probably spend an hour just talking about Naruto, which I could if I tried.
Oh, no, we totally could. Watch it for the amazing reveals. Watch it for the backstories that just get beautifully put in the front.
And then you can join us in wanting Konoha to be our home.
That's true.
And these people to be our fam.
Absolutely, and then watch it for just the amazing characters that get explored. So that is pretty much the end of that. Thanks for hanging out and geeking out with us.
If you guys have any more recommendations, or you love any of the things we mentioned, we are always happy to talk about them, fangirl about them,
and scream.
Ship, if you want to ship, you got your girl.
And if you notice, we have like a do you kind of policy here, where we're like, hey man, you like this, you don't like it, it's all cool. We can all live to agree and disagree and what have you.
If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos from us, definitely subscribe to the channel. We're trying to do it every week this year, so wish us luck on that. And we'll see you guys next week for our next video. Bye!